Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi here with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with today's section of Benny's Bats. Today is Wednesday, August 26th, and the idea of our Benny's Bats section is we try to figure out the pitchers on the mound and what their weaknesses are, and then look at the hitters that are going up against them on the other side to figure out who's in the best spot to do well against them. We have a 13-game slate going off tonight, so we got 26 guys on the mound, so let's get right into it. First guy we're going to talk about, Miami left-hander Chris Narveson. He's a rookie. He's only pitched in about 2 games so far this year. Right-handed bats have a .222 batting average against them, but they have hit 3 home runs already in only 7 innings pitched. So with him being a lefty, I think righties are the way you want to try to attack him. On that Pittsburgh team, there's a couple guys that make sense. As we mentioned yesterday, Francisco Cervelli has really good numbers against left-handed pitching, so he makes some sense as a cheap catching option. You got Marte and McCutchen in the outfield, who both have pretty good WOBAs in the 380, 390 range. And then the last guy is Jung-Ho Kang, shortstop with a WOBA around 360. He's been flashing a little bit of power lately. So those are the 4 guys that we would look at on that Miami team. Now, that game is in Miami, so it's not the greatest hitter's ballpark, but those 4 guys do stand out, so I think the 4 of them would be guys you can look to stack up or put into your roster here and there for your cash games as well. Let's see. Next guy we have is Jared Eichart going for the Phillies. He threw a gem in his debut. This is actually only his 2nd start in the majors. He is a right-handed pitcher going up against a really hot Mets team in a pretty good hitter's ballpark in Philadelphia. The 2 guys who really stand out on the Mets for me, you got Curtis Granderson, who has the best numbers, WOBA around 390, and Yoenis Cespedes, who's been absolutely on fire since coming over in the trade. Now, he's in the righty-righty matchup against Eichhoff today. But I think the way he's been hitting against right-handed pitching lately and all season, really, he's somebody that I think you have to consider in this matchup as well. Next guy we talk about, David Holmberg. Right-handed bats are hitting 347 against him with 6 homers in 18 innings. He's a left-handed pitcher. So they're going up against the Dodgers. So you got to think that whole platoon of right-handed bats that the Dodgers throw in there are basically all in play today. You got a guy like Kiki Hernandez, although he has been hitting much lower down in the order. He was hitting in the 1 and 2 spot when we were using him as a cheap option. Now he's hitting down in like the 6, 7, 8 hole. So I don't like him as much, but he is still pretty cheap on a lot of the sites. You got a guy like Scott Van Slyke. He hits in the middle of the order against left-handed pitching. Yasiel Puig is going to be back up towards the top of the order. He's been hitting left-handed pitching very well. His WOBA is up to 380 against them, has a ISO score over 200, so he's definitely somebody you want to consider as well. And Justin Turner, even though Justin Turner has been a guy that we looked at in righty-on-righty splits most of the season, lately he's been hitting left-handed pitching extremely well, and he's been batting cleanup in the middle of that order. As a matter of fact, his last 4 home runs have come against left-handed pitching, so I think that he is now safe to roll out against guys from either side of the plate. And it looks like he's starting to round back into the form he had before he got injured. So big fan of Justin Turner today as well. Let's see. We got Johan Flande going up against Atlanta. There's really nobody on this Atlanta team I want to target. I don't think Flande is a very good pitcher. 455 is his batting average to right-handed bats this year, 7 home runs and 34 innings pitched. But I can't really find a right-handed bat that I really have faith in targeting. I mean, Maben, Adonis Garcia, there's nobody on this Atlanta team that really stands out to me. If he was a right-hander going up against, a guy like Freddie Freeman, I think I might consider it a little, but I don't really like anything in this game. Next guy we can talk about, we got Matt Duffy for Minnesota. Left-handed bats do better against him, so John Jaso stands out for that Tampa Bay team. 360 WOBA, cheap catching option. Again, he's really the only left-handed bat that stands out, so he's the only guy I'm looking at there. You got Cody Anderson pitching for Cleveland. He goes up against Milwaukee. Again, left-handed bats, 277, 4 home runs in 21 innings. Maybe you can look at a guy like Adam Lind, if you need a cheap option like a Scooter Gannett or a Shane Peterson. But again, not a ton here that I really want to target either. Rick Porcello. Rick Porcello has been bad against both sides of the plate. Going up against Chicago White Sox, guys like Jose Abreu and Adam Eaton. Those are the 2 guys who stand out on the WOBA numbers, so they're probably the 2 guys that are in play. Porcello's been bad to righties and lefties, so you can use a righty like Abreu or a lefty like Eaton. I think both of those guys make a little bit of sense today. Jeff Locke, left-handed pitcher for Pittsburgh. He's going up against the Miami Marlins down in Miami. Left-handed bats have actually hit him for a higher average, but right-handed bats usually do better against him. So I'm not a huge fan of the lefty-on-lefty splits here. I don't really think there's a lot of guys here that I like. D. Gordon had a big game with the stolen bases yesterday. Apparently, Cervelli's not that hard to steal off of, so he could be a guy that's in play. But remember, with a lefty on the mound, it's a little bit tougher for for a guy to go ahead and get a good jump and steal. I think that Marcell Ozuna and Adeiny Hechavarria are the two bats that stand out the most based on the numbers. Neither guy is really somebody I love. Ozuna maybe a little bit more wherever you can find them cheap. But yeah, there's not a lot here. Miami's a good pitcher's ballpark. Not really looking to target a whole ton of bats. I don't think I would stack up Marlins today. Let's see. We got Brett Anderson pitching for the Dodgers. Right-handed bats have hit 275 against him with 13 home runs and 96 innings pitched, and left-handed bats are hitting about 270 against him as well. Guys like Frazier, Suarez, and Phillips are probably the ones that are going to be, the best targets to take a look at towards the top of that order. I don't love them. I mean, Anderson had a pretty good start his last time out. He's been very up and down this year, so for a tournament, I think you can target some of these bats because when he's bad, he's very bad. But when he's good, he's pretty good too. So he could limit the damage here. I think you could also look at Joey Votto a little bit. He's good in lefty-on-lefty matchups. Has a lefty-on-lefty matchup here. The splits, the splits are kind of okay for him. It's not horrible. It's not the best I've ever seen, but he's another guy that's in play. You got Bartolo Colon. Colon, left-handed bats are hitting 309 against him. Right-handed bats hitting 275. He's given up 11 home runs to each side of the plate. Again, this Phillies offense has been just absolutely on fire. The two guys that stand out that I would look at, Ryan Howard, first base option. He's got a little bit of power, hit a home run yesterday. I mean, the thing about Ryan Howard is his, basically the best case scenario line you've been getting out of him lately is like 1 for 3 with a walk and a home run. In the other games, he goes, 0 for 2 with 2 strikeouts and a walk. I mean, he's feast or famine, so he probably makes a better tournament play. But I do think he is a good tournament play because he's discounted underneath a lot of the other first basemen. And lately, he's been producing at a pretty high level. I mean, yesterday he had that big home run, helped make people some money. So I think there's, some merit in playing him. The other guy is Andres Blanco, who is still dirt cheap on just about every single site out there today. Again, it's kind of like the thing with Cesar Hernandez. If you have a guy who's this cheap, that's on a little bit of a streak, you don't need a ton out of him in order to make value. If Andres Blanco hits a double with somebody on base, that's basically enough points that he'll score by getting that RBI and that double to pay off his salary on a site like DraftKings. If he's like 22 or 2,800 somewhere else and he gets you a double with an RBI, well, again, that pays off his salary. That's basically all you need out of a guy who's that cheap. So if he's going to remain this cheap, yesterday he hit in the 5 hole. They had been hitting him in the 2 hole as well. In the 5 hole, he gets a little bit more chance to drive in some runs. In the 2 hole, he gets a little more chance to score some runs. Either way, I think it's good for him. So he's another guy that I really like, and I'm going to be rolling out as a salary saver. Let's see. We have Jake Peavy. Peavy hasn't been horrible. Right-handed bats have a little bit higher batting average against him, but left-handed bats have been the ones that hit him for all the power. 5 home runs already and 27 innings pitched. So I think on that Cubs team, you got to look at guys like Schwarber and Rizzo. I don't think I'd look at Coughlin because his average isn't that high. So the left-handed bats that are only average hitters, I wouldn't take. But the guys who have some power, like Schwarber and Rizzo, I definitely think are going to be in play against Peavy here. So those would be the two I'd look at. Schwarber especially. I mean, this guy has absolutely been killing right-handed pitching. So you can't really sleep on him. And Rizzo's been very hot lately too. So that's why I like them both. Other side of that game, Kyle Hendricks. Hendricks usually struggles most with left-handed bats, so maybe a guy like Brandon Belt would be somebody to look at. But that Giants team does hit right-handed pitching very well. You have guys like Posey and Pence, who I think are going to be in play. So those would basically be the guys who I'm looking at in this situation. Let's see. You got Hector Santiago pitching against Detroit. Santiago's been very good, but Detroit has also been very good. So this is going to be a tough matchup for me. Right-handed bats haven't done great against Santiago, but they've been okay. But some of the right-handed bats on Detroit have been elite, even against left-handed pitching. Miguel Cabrera is easily the best option there. J.D. Martinez is the secondary option, but J.D. Martinez hasn't been great. He's just been pretty solid against lefties. He actually hits better in righty-on-righty situations. You could also look at catcher James McCann, who hits well against left-handed pitching, and a guy like Jose Iglesias, who doesn't have a lot of power, but does have a pretty high average in that righty-lefty matchup. Next guy we have, Colby Lewis. Colby Lewis, left-handed bats are hitting about 270 against him with 10 home runs in 92 innings. And he's also given up 11 home runs to right-handed bats in 68 innings. Now, that second stat is the big one because he plays Toronto, who's going to throw a whole bunch of right-handed bats at him. And he's basically given up a home run every 6 innings to right-handed bats. So, again, it's a good hitter's ballpark. You got guys like Donaldson, Joey Bautista, Edwin Encarnacion. I think all 3 of those guys could be in play today. They're all expensive. They're all in a good hitter's park, though. They're all in a pretty decent matchup. Whichever one you felt comfortable rolling out there or whichever ones, I mean, I'm not going to stop you. I said a while back, the way that Toronto offense has been looking, it almost makes sense if you're a multi-entry player to start your night by putting together one Toronto stack, one Philadelphia Philly stack, and then figuring out what other guys you want to put into your rosters and what other stacks you want to make in order to fill up those multiple entries. Because between the Phillies and Toronto, the way those 2 teams have been hitting, basically once a week they win you a guaranteed tournament. So I think that is obviously something that's going to be in play. I don't think you can really fade completely that Toronto team, but I do think that they're kind of expensive and they are tough to fit them all into a roster together. Let's see. We got Patrick Corbin against St. Louis. We're going to get into some really bad matchups here. St. Louis is really bad against left-handed pitching. And the guys who you would really want to take when they do face a left-handed pitcher, guys like Matt Holliday, Randall Gierchuk, who had like good numbers, they're all out. They're not playing. So against a lefty, I think the one guy who's left, shortstop option, Johnny Peralta, is somebody you can take a look at. Again, he hasn't been great lately, but I do think he's an option against a left-handed pitcher. And he's probably the biggest bat that St. Louis has left from the right side at this point. We got Gio Gonzalez against San Diego. Justin Upton, maybe. It's about the only right-handed bat I would look at in this situation. But even him, I'm not really thrilled with. So I think Gio is actually a decent option today, and I don't think I'm going to be looking to target any bats against him. We got John Lackey against Arizona. Now, this one is a little bit interesting. Lackey's got about a 250, 260 batting average to both sides of the plate. And, I mean, you got guys on that Arizona team that hit right-handed pitching very well in righty-on-righty matchups. Guys like Paul Goldschmidt, Wellington Castillo, and the one guy in the lefty-righty matchup who hits really well is David Peralta. So I think if you're going to look at guys, those are the 3 guys that I would look at in that game. But again, I mean, Lackey's been pretty solid. He does have his moments where he gets blown up, but he's the kind of guy that he doesn't get you 10 strikeouts, but he also doesn't usually give up 7 or 8 runs. He's a very solid 6, 7, 8 inning kind of guy, 2, 3 runs. 4 or 5 strikeouts, just a decent line almost every time out there. Very consistent with what he does it often. But again, you can get to a guy like that. He has, a blow up or 2 in his past. And I mean, this Arizona team has been one of the best groups of bats over the last month. So I think that he makes a little bit of sense too. Next guy to look at, Wei-Yin Chen. Chen's been pretty good. Right-handed bats have been the way to get after him, though. He's a left-handed pitcher. Lorenzo Cain is the one guy who really stands out numbers-wise. And Ben Zobrist is another one who's been pretty hot. So I think Cain and Zobrist are probably the 2 guys I would look to use here against Chen. And I think that you can use them both against Chen. I think they're both in a very good spot. We got Justin Verlander going against the Angels. Verlander's been a tough guy for me because just when I think, okay, he's back and I play him, he gets lit up. And then when I'm off him because he got lit up, he goes out and throws a gem. I think he's looking a lot better. Watched a little bit of his last start. Watched a little bit of the start before that, actually, where he was dominant. God, that Angels team, I mean, you got Trout, you got Pujols. Neither one of them has been really hot. Pujols did have the home run yesterday, but he had been struggling over the course of the last month. Trout's been struggling over the course of the last week or so. Cole Calhoun is a lefty, so it's a lefty-righty matchup, but I just kind of feel like Verlander's going to have a pretty good game here. I don't know. Maybe that's me. I'm going to be anxious to see what Josh says about him on his pitching video today, but I think Verlander is definitely somebody that is going to have a good game, and if you like Verlander, then you can't like too many of these LA bats. I have heard Verlander's name being mentioned a lot this morning too, though, which means that if a lot of people are going to be on him, maybe some of those LA bats do make a good tournament play because they're going to be lower owned. So just keep that in mind. Let's see. Next guy up, we got Jimmy Nelson. Nelson's actually been pretty solid lately. He's been racking up a lot of strikeouts, but he really struggles against left-handed bats. They've been hitting 296 against him with 10 home runs and 63 innings pitched. So Jason Kipnis had a big game yesterday, racked up 3 or 4 hits. Michael Brantley had an even bigger game with a couple home runs. I think both of these guys on that Cleveland Indians team make a lot of sense to use today. They do sprinkle in a couple other left-handed bats. So take a look at that lineup, maybe some of the guys up top. I think you can put 3 or 4 of these bats together. Nelson does throw the ball kind of hard, but he does give up a few home runs. So I do like the guys that have a little bit more power over the guys that have, nothing but speed. But if you're going to stack them up, Kipnis and Brantley should definitely be in that stack. And then, figure out who else you want to build around them. Next guy I want to talk about, Tyson Ross. Ross has been pretty good lately, goes up against Washington. Bryce Harper's the one guy who stands out on the numbers. Ross struggles a little bit with left-handed bats. Bryce Harper being one of the best left-handed bats we have in baseball. He's really the only guy I'd look to target against Ross. You got Shelby Miller going up against Colorado. Weakened Colorado offense with Cargo out. You still got guys like Blackman in there, guys like Paulson. LeMahieu had a big game yesterday. So there are still some bats that can do some damage, but Miller's a pretty solid pitcher. Like I said, Blackman and Paulson, if Paulson's hitting cleanup or higher up in the order, those would probably be the 2 guys I'd look at. Miller's really tough righty on righty, so even though Arenado's good righty on righty, I don't know if I want to mess with that matchup. You got Johnny Cueto going up against Baltimore. Cueto's been really good lately. Baltimore has some nice bats on that team, guys like maybe a Parra or a Davis. Lefty-righty against Cueto, but to be honest, I'm not targeting anybody here. Cueto's been good. I'm not going to mess with that. You got David Price against Texas. Texas struggles with left-handed pitching. Beltre has been hitting lefties pretty well lately. He's starting to come around, but other than him, there's not anybody else I would even let get near my roster here. You got Chris Archer against Minnesota. Again, Miguel Sano, righty on righty. He's been killing the ball. But, Miguel Sano is basically like a 1-for-4 kind of guy, along the lines of like a Ryan Howard before, like we were talking. Yes, he can hit a home run for you, but in his other 3 or 4 at-bats, he's strikeout, ground ball, it's just he's solid for that upside where he's cheap, but where you have to start paying up for this guy now. Yesterday it was $5,000 over on DraftKings. I don't know if he's somebody who's worth a $5,000 price tag, but again, righty on righty matchups, he's been very good. But Chris Archer has also been great this year, and Minnesota as a team has not been. So I don't really like anybody else outside of him, and I do like Archer tonight. So I don't even know how much Sano I will have. Chris Sale against Boston. Boston has been struggling against left-handed pitching all season. Chris Sale's been one of the most dominant lefties we have in the game, so I don't think I'm going to be looking at anybody on this Boston team. You got guys like Xander Bogaerts, and then some of the new outfielders they called up, Jackie Bradley, Rusney Castillo. Those guys do good against left-handed pitching, but Chris Sale is not an ordinary lefty, and he's not somebody that you want to have, a lot of guys targeted against. So that basically wraps it up today for our Benny's Bat section. Thank you guys for joining us here at rotocurve.com. Make sure you get over to rotocurve.com and sign up for an account. Start earning curve points. Trade them in for tickets to games, money to play on the sites, RotoCurve swag like hats and shirts and stuff like that. You can follow us on Twitter at RotoCurve. You can follow me on Twitter at BennyR11. If you have any questions, like I said, make sure you get over to RotoCurve, throw them up in the forum, and one of us will be there to answer them for you, or one of the other members of the community. Everybody in the community is really nice, really helpful. A lot of good information gets thrown around and debated before lineups lock. So make sure you get over there. It'll help you with your game. And as always, stay classy, DFS.